The day I found out about the affair was anything but ordinary. It wasn't a grand, dramatic moment, but rather a quiet, subtle shift in the atmosphere around me. My wife, Sarah, had always been an enigma in the best of ways. We had been together for almost a decade that felt like both a dream and a prison at the same time. There were always little signs, late nights, strange excuses, an unfamiliar tone in her voice, but I never wanted to acknowledge them. I was too invested in the idea of what we had, in the life we had built together. But one night, everything changed. It wasn't the first time she had stayed late at work, or claimed to be out with friends, but this time, it felt different. I could sense it. That sinking feeling that gnawed at the back of my mind like a shadow growing larger in the dark. So, I decided to follow her. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Maybe I was looking for something to confirm my suspicions, or maybe I was hoping I was just being paranoid. But when I saw her with him, I knew. I had watched her walk into a dimly lit restaurant on the outskirts of town, my heart thumping against my chest as I parked the car and watched. I tried to tell myself I was just being dramatic, overthinking it, but then I saw him, tall, dark, and with a smile that I had never seen her give me. Not once. She laughed, a laugh that I hadn't heard in months. It wasn't the laugh I knew, the one that shared quiet moments at home. No, this was different. It was carefree, unburdened, as if nothing mattered except the man sitting across from her. And then, as the evening went on, the touches started. A hand brushing her back, lingering a bit too long on her shoulder. And the way she looked at him, her eyes gleaming in a way I hadn't seen in years. I sat there, frozen, unable to tear my eyes away from the scene unfolding before me. My heart was in my throat, the lump so thick I could barely breathe. She had done it. She had betrayed me. I didn't know what hurt more, the sight of her with him or the realization that she had been lying to my face for who knows how long. The dinner wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an isolated incident. She had planned it. She had made a decision, and I was nothing but a fool, believing in the lie she had sold me for years. I sat in my car, shaking, watching as they walked out together. He kissed her on the cheek before she got into her car. The kiss was soft, intimate, like they had done it 100 times. And then, she drove away. I followed, silently trailing behind her until she reached our house. But tonight, nothing was normal. She didn't come inside. Instead, she parked, grabbed her purse, and walked straight into his arms. She kissed him, right there, on the street, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, the reality of what I had seen hitting me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't a shock in the way I expected. It wasn't a grand, dramatic affair with tears and yelling. No, it was far worse. It was the quiet death of something I had held dear for years. It was the understanding that I had been a fool. That the woman I loved had already made her choice, and I was nothing but a bystander in the wreckage of our marriage. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. I couldn't even remember how I got back, but as I entered the house, everything felt suffocating. The walls felt smaller, the air thicker. I could almost hear the mocking laughter echoing in my mind, taunting me, reminding me of my failure. My wife had betrayed me, and I had been too blind to see it. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. What I had just witnessed was only a small part of the story. There was much more to uncover. I had never felt so cold in my life. The moment I walked through the door, my skin prickled with a mix of dread and anger, but mostly disbelief. How could she? How could Sarah, my Sarah, do this to me? I had known her since we were teenagers, watched her grow into the woman I thought I knew inside and out. But now, after everything, I realized how little I really knew. She had shattered that image with a single, soft kiss. It had been hours since I'd followed her, and I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. Every detail, every touch, every glance. I needed answers. I needed to hear it from her. I needed to hear her admit it. And so, without thinking twice, I walked straight into our bedroom, where Sarah was sitting, casually scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed. "Who is he, Sarah?" I asked, my voice low, almost a growl. Her eyes flicked up at me, startled at the sudden question. For a moment, I saw her mask crack. But it was brief. It was a fleeting moment, and then she recovered. She sat up straighter, the same smug expression returning to her face. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice thick with false innocence. I couldn't believe it. The audacity. How could she act so casual after what I had just witnessed? The woman I had spent years with, the one I thought I could trust, was sitting there in front of me, acting like she hadn't just betrayed me in the most blatant way possible. "Don't play dumb. I saw you. I saw the two of you together," I said, my voice rising, the heat building in my chest. "I saw the way he touched you. The way you looked at him. Don't lie to me, Sarah. Just tell me the truth." For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or maybe fear. But she was quick to mask it, her expression shifting into something colder, more distant. "You're crazy," she snapped, standing up and walking toward the door, as if she could simply walk away from this. "You always do this. Always overreacting." "Overreacting?" I repeated, my voice incredulous. "You're telling me I'm overreacting after everything I saw? After the way you—" She cut me off with a harsh laugh, turning back to face me, arms crossed over her chest. "Oh, please. You've been acting like an idiot for years. You think I didn't notice how miserable you've been? You think I didn't see how you've been too busy with your work to even care about me? Maybe I just got tired of it. Maybe I wanted something more, something real." I felt my breath catch in my throat. Was she actually blaming me for this? For her actions? For her decision to betray me? The anger surged in me again, stronger this time, but there was something else beneath it, something colder, darker. Disbelief. Confusion. "You wanted this?" I asked, almost laughing bitterly. "You wanted to throw everything away because of whatever this is? Some guy who treats you like nothing? Like a toy?" Her eyes narrowed, and her lips curled into a smile that made my stomach turn. "Don't act like you're some saint," she hissed. "You've been a terrible husband. You think I didn't notice? All those late nights, all the times you ignored me? It's always about you, isn't it? Your career, your friends. You never once thought about me." "That's a lie," I said, my fists clenching. "I've always been here for you." "No," she said sharply, walking toward me with a look that could only be described as venomous. "You haven't. And maybe it's time for you to finally realize that. Maybe it's time for you to stop pretending like you didn't deserve it." My jaw clenched. My heart raced. I had always known she was strong-willed, stubborn even, but this was different. This wasn't the woman I had loved. This wasn't the Sarah I had married. This woman standing in front of me, this cruel, dismissive woman, was a stranger. And in that moment, I understood something more. She wasn't even sorry. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't trying to make excuses or even apologize. She was justifying it. She was telling me that all of this, all the lies, all the betrayal, was somehow my fault. As if her actions, her infidelity, were somehow a response to me, to something I had done or not done. And then, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, she turned away. "I'm done here," she said, her tone final. "I've had enough of this marriage. I want a life where I'm actually appreciated. If you think you can change my mind with this pathetic little interrogation, think again. I felt something snap in me, a rush of anger so overwhelming I almost didn't recognize myself. You've been planning this, haven't you? You've been thinking about this for months while I was just too blind to see it. She didn't even flinch. Her face remained cold, unaffected. Maybe, she said with a smirk. But it doesn't matter anymore. You're too late. And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, empty. My legs felt weak, my chest tight. I couldn't breathe. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had built my entire life around, had just torn everything apart. I had been the fool. I had believed in a lie. But this was just the beginning. She had made her move, but now, so would I. I spent the next few days in a fog. A thick, suffocating haze that clouded my every thought, my every movement. The house felt like a tomb, silent, oppressive, as if everything that had once lived within its walls had been sucked out, leaving nothing but hollow echoes. Sarah hadn't come home that night. Or the next. She didn't even bother to explain herself anymore. And I couldn't bring myself to care about what she had to say. She had already made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. But then, something happened that I hadn't expected. I had decided to confront her again. Not with questions or accusations, but with a demand, one final conversation where I could lay everything out. I needed closure, even if she wasn't going to give it to me. I was done with the games. But when I arrived at our home, it wasn't Sarah who greeted me at the door. It was him. The bastard. The one I had seen with her. His name was Jake, tall, scruffy, wearing the kind of smug grin that made my skin crawl. It wasn't the first time I'd seen him, but it was the first time I'd seen him in my house, in the place where my life had once felt whole. I was so angry I couldn't see straight, but before I could say a word, he shoved a knife into my hand, pressing it against my throat. "Now you're a real cuckold," he sneered. "You'll watch, while we have fun with her. You'll stand there, weak and pathetic, and watch." The world tilted. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. It wasn't the words that shocked me. It was the complete disrespect, the way he spoke to me as if I were nothing. I wanted to lash out, but the cold steel of the knife pressed deeper into my skin, a reminder that I was powerless in that moment. For a split second, all I could think of was Sarah. Where was she? Was she in on this? Did she even care about me anymore? "Watch, bastard," Jake said, his voice a venomous whisper. "Watch how you should treat me." He shoved me, pushing me into the living room. There, on the couch, sat Sarah. She was staring at me, no guilt, no apology. Just cold, empty eyes. She had orchestrated this, I realized. She had planned this humiliation. It wasn't just the affair, it was the power she had over me, the control she wanted to exert. And she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Jake sat next to her, his arm casually draped over her shoulder, like they were some twisted couple. Sarah didn't even look at me as I stood there, frozen, unable to process what was happening. My heart was thumping so loudly in my chest I thought it might burst. "Don't just stand there," Sarah finally said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You should be thankful we're even letting you watch. Maybe you'll learn something about how a real man treats me." I felt my world shatter again, a second time, in a way I didn't think was possible. There was no remorse in her eyes. She was enjoying this. Enjoying the humiliation. The destruction of everything we had. "I don't know what's worse," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "That you're doing this to me, or that you think I'll let you." Jake's laugh echoed through the room. "You've already let me. You've been nothing but a joke this whole time." I had never felt so weak, so utterly helpless. But there was a fire growing inside me. A fire I hadn't felt in so long. Something cold, something dark. I wasn't going to let her do this to me. Not again. Not like this. I don't know what made me snap. Maybe it was the look of pure satisfaction on her face, or maybe it was Jake's smug grin, or maybe it was just the weight of everything that had built up inside me, finally spilling over. I reached out, grabbed the closest thing I could find, a heavy lamp, and swung it with all the force I could muster. The glass shattered against Jake's skull with a sickening crack. He fell to the ground, groaning in pain, clutching his head. Sarah screamed in shock, but I didn't care. I didn't care about anything except the fury that had overtaken me. I grabbed Jake by the collar, dragging him to his feet with a strength I didn't know I had. His eyes were dazed, blood dripping down his face, but he still had that arrogant smirk. I threw him into the wall, hearing the sickening thud of his body crashing against it. He crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. "You think you can just walk into my life and destroy everything?" I spat, my hands shaking with adrenaline. "You think you can come into my house, my home, and take what's mine?" I stood over him, breathing heavily, watching him writhe in pain. But then, I turned to Sarah. She hadn't moved. She was still sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, her eyes cold and indifferent. "Is this really what you want?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "You think this is power? You think this is control?" Her eyes flickered, but there was no apology. No regret. Nothing. "This is who I am now," she said, her voice ice cold. "You never understood me, and now you never will." I stared at her for a long time, the weight of her words crashing over me like a wave. But deep down, I knew one thing for sure: I was done. This life, this marriage, it was over. I turned and left the room, walking out into the night, leaving her and Jake behind. I had a plan. And it was far from over. What I was going to do next? Well, that was something I hadn't figured out yet, but it was coming. And I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I had won or taken control. If anything, I felt empty, like I had just unleashed a storm inside me that I couldn't contain, and now there was no going back. I walked out of the house, leaving Sarah and Jake behind, but it was the image of her face, cold, unapologetic, almost indifferent, that haunted me. I couldn't go back to the house. Not yet. I couldn't face the place where everything had shattered. I drove aimlessly for hours, my hands tight on the wheel, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do now? What came next after everything I had just witnessed? My mind circled back to Jake, to the bastard who thought he could just walk in and take my life apart. The audacity of him. The sheer disrespect. I didn't know where I was going, but eventually, I found myself at a bar. It was late, the dim lighting casting long shadows over the worn-out tables. It was the kind of place where people came to drown their sorrows, and tonight, I was no exception. I walked in, ordered a drink, and took a seat in the corner, hoping for some solitude, some space to figure out my next move. The alcohol hit me quickly, but it didn't numb the rage. It didn't take away the sting of betrayal. I tried to clear my head, but the images kept flashing: Sarah laughing with Jake, touching him, kissing him, doing all the things I thought we had shared. I was furious, but there was something else too, something darker. A twisted sense of clarity. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It wasn't even about Jake. This was about me, about reclaiming what had been taken from me, about making them understand the price of their betrayal. I didn't know how long I sat there, nursing my drink, until I noticed someone walk in. He wasn't familiar, but there was something about the way he carried himself, the way he moved through the room. He wasn't here to drink away his problems. He was here on business. And I could tell, just from the way he scanned the room, that he was the kind of man who didn't just sit back and watch life happen. He took control. I watched him for a few moments, and then he locked eyes with me. There was something in his gaze, sharp, calculating. I didn't think much of it at first, but then he started walking toward me. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low and steady. I gave a tight, almost involuntary nod, and he sat down without waiting for permission. He was older than me, mid-40s maybe, but there was a certain confidence about him that made it impossible to ignore. "You look like a man with a story," he said, not in a patronizing way, but more like he was sizing me up, trying to figure out what was going on behind my eyes. I didn't feel like talking, didn't feel like unloading my life onto a stranger, but something about his presence made me want to speak. Maybe it was the intensity in his eyes. Maybe it was the fact that I needed to say it out loud, just once, to someone who didn't know me. "I'm a man who's been betrayed," I said, my voice rougher than I expected. He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Instead, he motioned for the bartender and ordered a drink. "What's your plan?" he asked after a moment. I looked at him, confused. "Your plan," he repeated. "For the situation. You've been wronged. You're clearly angry. But what's your next move?" I was taken aback. No one had asked me that. Not like this. Not with that level of interest, that quiet understanding. I stared at my drink, trying to find the words. "I don't know yet," I admitted. I thought I had it all figured out. I thought I knew who she was. I thought she was mine. But I've been living a lie. She's been lying to me, playing me for a fool. My voice trailed off, the bitterness sinking deeper with every word. He nodded slowly, as if considering my words. "People lie. It's what they do. What matters is what you do when the truth is revealed. What matters is whether you sit back and take it, or whether you do something about it." I felt a flicker of something inside me. A spark. It wasn't just rage. It wasn't just the need for revenge. It was something more, something colder. The idea that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as powerless as I felt. "What do you suggest?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was a calculated one, like he had been waiting for me to ask. "You don't just take revenge," he said, his voice dropping lower, as if sharing a secret. "You make them pay. You make them regret the moment they ever thought they could disrespect you. But you do it in a way that's clean. Strategic. You don't just lash out. You make them understand that you're not someone they can walk over. You make sure they know exactly what it costs to cross you." I felt my pulse quicken. This man wasn't just talking about some petty revenge. He was talking about a calculated, ruthless response. And for the first time since everything had come crashing down, the idea didn't seem so far-fetched. "Tell me more," I said, leaning in, my voice steady now. He took a slow sip of his drink, looking at me with that same calculating gaze. "You need to make them suffer. All of them. Start with Jake. He thinks he's invincible. Show him he's not. But the real fun? The real satisfaction? It comes when you turn it all back on her. Make her see the man she thought she could control, and show her exactly what happens when she takes a man for granted." I felt the blood rush to my face. The anger surged again, but now it was tempered with something else, something colder, more dangerous. "I'm listening," I said, my voice tight with anticipation. And just like that, I knew, this wasn't about closure anymore. It wasn't about fixing what had been broken. This was about making Sarah, and Jake, pay for everything they had done to me. And I would make them regret the day they ever thought they could get away with it. The next few days felt like a blur. My mind was racing with everything the man at the bar had said. The words echoed in my head, louder than my own thoughts, louder than the anger that still simmered in me. He had planted a seed. A seed that grew fast, taking over my every waking thought. Make them regret it. Make them suffer. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about control. It was about regaining the power I had so foolishly given away. I had spent years believing that love would be enough, that loyalty and trust could hold everything together. But now, I realized how naive I had been. Sarah didn't value that. She valued power, manipulation, and the ability to destroy when it suited her. And it was time for me to show her that I could do the same. I started with Jake. He was the easiest target, the most vulnerable. He had no idea who he was messing with, and he had no clue what was coming for him. I waited for the right moment. I knew where he lived, the hours he worked, the places he liked to frequent. I followed him for days, studying his routine like a predator stalking its prey. And then, one evening, when the streets were quiet and the city felt like it was holding its breath, I saw him. He was walking home from his usual dive bar, drunk, unsteady on his feet. It was the perfect opportunity. I followed him at a distance, watching him as he swerved down the alley that led to his building. He had no idea I was there, lurking in the shadows, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, as he fumbled with his keys, I stepped forward, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of snow on the ground. He didn't even hear me approach. I swung the bat with all my might. The crack of it against his ribs was like music to my ears. He staggered back, gasping in shock, but I didn't give him a moment to recover. I swung again, this time connecting with his leg. He dropped to the ground, howling in pain. "Jake," I said, my voice low and calm. "I hope you enjoyed your time with my wife. Because you won't be walking for a while." He groaned, clutching his leg, his face contorted in pain. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I knelt down beside him, grabbing him by the collar and lifting him off the ground. "You think you can just come into my life and take whatever you want?" I asked, my voice a razor-sharp whisper. "You think you can walk away unscathed?" He sputtered, trying to speak, but I didn't care. I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses. He wasn't going to get the chance to explain himself. I had no interest in understanding why he did it. The only thing I cared about was making him feel the weight of his actions. I pulled him up, my hand tightening around his throat. "You're going to remember this night for the rest of your life, Jake. And when you wake up in the hospital, I want you to think about everything you took from me. Because I'm not done. I'm just getting started." I shoved him back to the ground and stood up, feeling the rush of power surge through me. For the first time in days, I felt like I had control. Like I was in charge of my own life again. As I walked away, leaving him there, I couldn't help but smile. I knew Jake would be out of commission for a while, maybe longer. His arrogance had cost him. And Sarah? Well, she would get her turn soon enough. But even as I reveled in the small victory, something inside me told me this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. There was a deeper part of me that still hadn't been fully satisfied. A deeper part of me that still burned with fury, that still wanted to make Sarah feel the same way I did, broken, discarded, betrayed. I wasn't just going to let this go. No, there were still 2 more people to deal with, and neither of them were going to get off easy. The next day, I received a call that changed everything. It was from Sarah's phone. But it wasn't her on the line. It was him, Jake. I could hear the pain in his voice, the desperation. He was begging me to let him off the hook. Begging me to not go further with what I had started. "I'll tell her," he said, his voice strained. "I'll tell her that it was a mistake, that I never meant to hurt you, that it was just a fling. Just don't hurt me anymore." It was almost laughable. The man who had caused all this pain, who had taken my wife from me, was now begging for mercy. And yet, I didn't feel any pity for him. Not an ounce. I leaned into the phone, my voice cold and calculated. Jake, you don't get to make demands here. You don't get to call the shots. This is my game now, and you're just a pawn. I'm not interested in your apologies. I'm not interested in your excuses. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. I could almost hear him gulping on the other end of the line. You'll regret ever getting involved with her, I said. You'll regret every single moment you spent in my life. I hung up the phone and looked out the window, the cold winter air biting at my skin. My thoughts were clear now. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming everything that had been stolen from me. It wasn't just Jake who needed to pay. It was Sarah too. I had done what I needed to do with Jake. Now, the real challenge awaited. And I wasn't going to back down. There was one more person to deal with. One more person to make feel what I had felt. The final reckoning would come soon. And when it did, Sarah would finally understand what it meant to be on the other side of betrayal. I couldn't get Sarah out of my mind. No matter how many times I replayed the events with Jake in my head, no matter how many times I heard his whimpers echo in my ears, it was her that lingered. She was the reason I was here, the reason I had become this man I didn't even recognize anymore. It wasn't just the betrayal. It wasn't just the fact that she had lied to me for months, possibly years. It was the way she had laughed in my face when I confronted her, the way she had acted like I didn't matter. Like I was some insignificant part of her life that could be discarded when it suited her. Jake was a pawn, a piece of the puzzle. But Sarah? Sarah was the queen, and I was going to make her pay. I spent the next few days waiting. It was the hardest part. I could have done something rash, I could have confronted her, but I knew that wouldn't be satisfying. It wasn't enough to just see her cower, to see her beg for forgiveness. No, I wanted more than that. I wanted her to understand what she had lost, what she had thrown away. I wanted her to know exactly how it felt to be in my shoes, to feel the weight of the lies and the betrayal. I kept my distance from her. I didn't call her. I didn't check her social media. I didn't even pretend to care. And that, in itself, was a weapon. Every moment she didn't hear from me, every day that went by without a word, she knew something was coming. I could feel it in the air when I passed her on the street or when I saw her at work. There was an unsettling quiet between us, and I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she avoided me. But that wasn't enough. I needed to make her sweat, to make her regret ever betraying me. Then, the phone rang. It was Sarah. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. My heart wasn't racing, but there was a coolness inside me, a calmness that surprised me. This was it. This was the moment she would try to explain herself, try to twist everything and make me feel like I was the one in the wrong. Hello? I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. Where are you? Sarah's voice was strained, filled with something that could have been guilt or fear, I couldn't tell. I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk. I took a deep breath. We do need to talk, I said, each word measured. But not in the way you think. There was a silence on the other end. Then, what does that mean? I let the silence hang between us for a moment longer. Then, I spoke again, my words slow, deliberate. I'm not interested in your excuses. I'm not interested in hearing how it was my fault, or how you didn't mean it. I'm done listening to you lie. Her voice cracked. Please, I'm sorry. I've been trying to reach you to apologize. You have to understand, it wasn't like that. I didn't mean to hurt you. Really? I cut her off. Because I watched you. I watched you laugh with him. I watched you touch him, kiss him. And you thought I wouldn't notice? She was silent for a long time. I could hear her breathing on the other end, trying to gather her words, trying to come up with some kind of defense. But I wasn't interested in hearing it anymore. I'm not done yet, I said, my voice low and firm. What do you mean? She asked, sounding genuinely confused. I'm going to make you understand what you've done, I said. But not just by leaving. Not by just walking away. I'm going to make you feel it. I'm going to make you feel everything I've felt. You're going to regret this. You're going to regret every moment you've spent with him. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing faster now, panic setting in. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Please, don't do anything crazy. I laughed, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was empty. You think I'm crazy? I asked. You think you're in a position to tell me what to do? I could hear the desperation in her voice now. Please, just meet with me. We can talk this through. You can't do this. This isn't you. But I wasn't listening. I had already made my decision. The moment I saw her with Jake, the moment I realized how easily she had discarded me, I knew that this wasn't just about a fight. This was about power. This was about me reclaiming everything she had stolen from me, even my own sense of self. I wasn't going to let her just walk away from this without feeling the consequences. I'll be there, I said, cutting her off. But don't expect forgiveness. Don't expect anything from me except the truth. I'll be at the park at 7. I hung up the phone without waiting for a response. For a moment, I stood there, just breathing, letting the weight of everything settle over me. I was calm now, focused. Sarah was going to face the consequences of her actions. She was going to understand what it meant to betray someone who truly loved her. I didn't care what she said in her apology. I didn't care if she cried or begged. This wasn't about saving our marriage. This was about showing her that betrayal had a price. And I was about to make her pay. At the park, I stood by the fountain, watching the water cascade down, my mind racing. I was prepared for anything, but I still couldn't help but feel a tight knot in my stomach. This was the moment. The moment that would change everything. She arrived right on time, her face pale, her eyes darting around nervously. When she saw me, she hesitated, then walked toward me, as if expecting me to open my arms, to welcome her back with some pathetic excuse for understanding. But I wasn't that man anymore. Not after everything. Let's talk, she said, her voice trembling, but I could see the anger behind her eyes. She was still holding on to her pride, still trying to control the situation. I didn't respond immediately. I just stared at her. And then, slowly, I spoke. No more talking, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. It's too late for that. The air between us was heavy, charged with everything that had happened. There was no going back now. And for the first time, I knew, this was my moment. My reckoning. The cold air hung heavy between us, and for a moment, I thought she might try to backpedal, apologize one more time, or beg for some sliver of mercy. But there was something different in her eyes. It wasn't the guilt I had expected, or the contrition I had hoped for. No, what I saw instead was defiance. That spark in her gaze told me everything I needed to know. Sarah was still the same woman who had destroyed me, and she wasn't going down without a fight. You're making a huge mistake, she said, her voice low and steady, but there was a sharp edge to it, like a blade being slowly sharpened. You think you're going to punish me for this? You think you can scare me into feeling bad about what happened? I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her, waiting for the realization to hit her. She had been running the show for far too long, and I had let her. But now, the tables had turned. I'm not trying to scare you, I said slowly, my voice cool. I'm showing you who's in control now. Her lips curled into a thin smile, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She wasn't as confident as she tried to make herself seem. Oh please, she scoffed, stepping closer to me, her heels clicking against the pavement. You think this is going to get to me? You're pathetic. You always have been. The words stung more than I wanted to admit, but they only served to fuel the fire inside me. She was right about one thing: I had been pathetic. I had let her walk all over me, let her tear me apart while I did nothing but beg for her affection. I wasn't that man anymore. You really think that hurts me? I shot back, my voice now cold, my body tense. You think I care what you say to me? You've been dragging me through the dirt for months, and now you want to pretend you're the one in control? Her eyes narrowed, and she took another step closer. I don't need you anymore. I don't need anyone. I've got what I want, and you're just some sad little man who can't let go. The venom in her words was almost poetic, but it wasn't enough to shake me. You think that's how this works? I asked, my voice a low growl now, rising with frustration. You think you can just walk away from everything you've done and leave me with nothing? You think I'll just forget about Jake and all the others, like they didn't mean anything? Her face twisted in disgust. You're pathetic. You've been chasing shadows this whole time, pretending you were the victim. I never owed you anything. You were just a tool to get what I wanted. The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. No, instead, I clenched my fists, my mind racing. This was it. This was the moment where everything came crashing down. You want to talk about tools? I said, stepping forward, closing the distance between us. My voice was barely above a whisper, but every word hung in the air like a death sentence. You've been using me your entire life, Sarah. You've used me for everything, for security, for affection, for control. And now, you think you can throw me away like I'm nothing? She looked at me with that smug, self-satisfied grin, like she had already won. But there was something in her eyes now, something cracking, something unraveling. She could feel it, too. The shift in power. The shift in control. Don't pretend like you're better than me, she spat. You're just as weak as the rest of them. Just another man who thinks he can dominate me, but it won't work. You'll never get the satisfaction you think you're owed. I took another step toward her, closing in on the gap. Her words were poison, but I was done listening. You think you know me, but you've never understood me. You've never cared to understand who I really am. You think you can control everything around you, but that's over. It ends tonight. There was a silence. The kind that felt like it was stretching, pulling taut, just before everything broke loose. And then, in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't physical, but it was palpable. Are you really going to do this? She asked, her voice suddenly less sure of itself, less smug. Are you really going to go this far? You think you can just ruin me? I stared at her, trying to read the layers beneath her words, trying to understand the woman who had so easily broken me. The woman who had destroyed everything I believed in. You've already ruined yourself, Sarah, I said, my voice sharp. I'm just here to remind you. The silence between us deepened, thick and suffocating. It wasn't just a moment of tension, it felt like a countdown, like every second that passed was pulling us closer to an inevitable explosion. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but before she could say anything, the sound of a car door slamming echoed in the distance. We both turned, instinctively, to see a car pulling up to the curb. I couldn't help but notice the man behind the wheel. He was familiar, too familiar. The guy I had been following the last few days. The third one. The one who had been spending time with Sarah in secret. I watched as he stepped out of the car, his gaze locking with mine. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. He was just as surprised to see me as I was to see him. And then Sarah spoke, a wicked smile playing on her lips. Well, if it isn't my dear husband, the one who thinks he can control everything. You want to play games? Fine. Let's see who wins. My pulse quickened, my mind spinning. I didn't know if I was prepared for what was about to unfold, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over yet. In fact, it was only just beginning. The game had changed. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I took a step toward the car, toward the man who had dared to walk into my life and take what was mine. And as I did, Sarah's voice rang out behind me, mocking, triumphant. You really think you're in control now? You're nothing but a pawn, just like all the others. I didn't look back. There was no point in responding. She had already made her choice, and now, so had I. I could hear Sarah's mocking voice trailing off in the distance, but I didn't turn back. My focus was entirely on the man who had just stepped out of the car, Jake. His posture was confident, almost smug. He seemed to think that everything was still under control, that I was still just a frustrated husband with a fragile ego. But I was done being fragile. I was done being the weak one. As I approached him, I could see the surprise in his eyes. He wasn't expecting me to be this close. He probably thought he was safe, that he had all the time in the world to continue whatever it was he had been doing with Sarah. But that was the thing, he hadn't accounted for me. Jake, I said, my voice cold. Funny seeing you here. He looked at me with a faint smile, trying to mask his nerves. What's this, huh? You following me now? You think I'm scared of you? I stopped in front of him, close enough that I could see the bead of sweat forming on his forehead. You should be, I said, my tone like ice. I've spent months chasing shadows, letting her drag me through this hell. But I'm done with all that. You're not just a mistake, Jake. You're a reminder of everything I've lost, everything she's taken from me. He took a step back, his smile faltering. Listen, man, he started, raising his hands in a half-hearted gesture of surrender. This isn't what you think. Sarah. I didn't let him finish. I don't want to hear about Sarah. I'm not here for explanations or excuses. I'm here for something much more satisfying than just talking. For the first time, I saw him hesitate. The bravado he had been trying to hold on to seemed to slip away. I could see his mind racing, calculating, trying to figure out if he could somehow talk his way out of this, if there was some way to salvage his dignity. But he was too late. The truth had already settled in between us. I moved forward, pushing past him in a swift motion, and grabbed him by the collar of his jacket. He stumbled back, but I didn't give him a chance to react. I shoved him up against the car, my hands tightening on his shirt. You don't get it, do you? I growled, my voice barely contained. You think this is just about getting some cheap thrill with my wife? You think this is just some little game? No, Jake. This is about everything. This is about me getting my life back. And you? You're just a casualty in the war she started. Jake's face turned pale, his bravado shattered. He tried to push me off, but it was weak, desperate. He had no power here. You don't have to do this, man, he pleaded, his voice strained. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean to. I slammed him back against the car harder this time. I didn't ask for your apology, I said, my voice full of venom. I'm done with apologies. I'm done with being the fool who believes in redemption. You want to know what you deserve? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You don't deserve to walk away from this. He started to mumble, but I wasn't listening anymore. I had spent so long consumed by anger, hurt, and a need for revenge that I didn't even need to hear him beg. I already knew what I was going to do. It was then that I heard Sarah's voice again, calling out from behind me. Don't do this, Jason, she shouted. It's not worth it. You're better than this. You don't need to stoop to his level. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see her standing there, hands trembling, her face contorted in some form of twisted desperation. The woman who had once been my everything was now pleading for mercy, for him. Don't listen to her, Jake said, his voice shaking. You don't want to go this far. Think about what you're doing. You can't just destroy everything. For a moment, a part of me hesitated. I could see Sarah standing there, her eyes wide, trying to salvage whatever dignity she had left. But it was too late. The moment of weakness I had once shown her was gone. I wasn't the man who would beg. I wasn't the man who would tolerate lies, manipulation, or disrespect anymore. You've already destroyed everything, I said quietly, releasing my grip on Jake and taking a step back. The only difference now is that you'll remember who you messed with. You'll remember who made you pay. I turned to Sarah, locking eyes with her. There was no more love in me, no more desire to salvage what we had. I had watched her manipulate me for too long, and now it was time for her to live with the consequences of her choices. You think you can just play both sides, Sarah? I asked, my voice calm but laced with fury. You think you can humiliate me and walk away unscathed? You've got another thing coming. She stepped back, almost as if she wanted to retreat into the shadows, but there was nowhere for her to hide. The woman who had controlled so much of my life was now standing in front of me, helpless, exposed. And I didn't feel sorry for her. I looked back at Jake, who was still trying to regain his composure, rubbing his neck where I had grabbed him. You're lucky this is all you're getting, I told him. You're lucky I'm not dragging you both through the streets for everyone to see what you did. But trust me, this is just the beginning. You'll both live with the scars of what you've done. And no amount of pretending will ever erase them. With that, I turned on my heel and walked away, not bothering to look back. I could hear Sarah calling out to me, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had finally taken control back. And nothing, was going to make me doubt that decision again. As I walked away, a strange sense of calm washed over me. It wasn't victory. It wasn't relief. It was something else, something I couldn't name. I wasn't the man who had been humiliated and broken anymore. I had become someone else, someone who had learned the hard way that the worst betrayals could only be defeated by the strongest of wills. And now, Sarah and Jake? They had to live with the aftermath of their choices. They had to carry the weight of the truth I had uncovered. For me, that was enough. The rest was just noise.